May 10th, 1994. The sun rose, high and bright, over Pretoria.
But this wasn't just any South African dawn.
No, this was the end of a century of darkness. And the atmosphere, it wasn't just warm or clear, it was charged, electric.
You have to imagine the scene right there beneath that sky at the Union Buildings Amphitheater.
And you have to understand what that place was.
For 80 years, that magnificent curved sandstone complex. It wasn't just a government building. It was the physical, the spiritual headquarters of racial domination.
It was built high on a hill on purpose to look down on the Capitol, a monument to white supremacy.
And on this day, this single day, the symbolic gravity of that place was being completely, well, inverted.
That very seat of racial exclusivity was suddenly hosting the largest gathering of international leaders South African soil had ever seen.
Dignitaries from over 140 countries. I mean, this wasn't just some local political event.
It was a global convergence, a sign that the moral order of the world was, in some small way, being righted.
And our mission today is to step right into that moment. We're going to use Mandela's own words, from long walk to freedom, to really feel the emotional weight of it all.
Right. We want to understand what he meant by courage, by liberation, and, the staggering cost of true freedom for everyone.
And to really sharpen that feeling of suppressed dignity, we're going to bring in a contrasting lens, a poem.
A tiger in the zoo.
Yes. It's a way to viscerally feel that tension between this unlimited potential and the crushing reality of being confined.
Whether that confinement is made of literal iron bars or the metaphorical chains of prejudice. So let's stay there at the Union Buildings, because that transformation is just so central to this whole story.
Absolutely. The host nation, which for decades had been seen as a pariah, totally isolated by sanctions and boycotts.
Was suddenly the world stage.
And it wasn't just a bureaucratic changing of the guard. That sandstone stage, the backdrop for every single racist law, was now hosting what Mandela called a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations.
The space itself was emancipated. It was a symbol that the power now belonged to all the people.
And that the state was finally serving democracy, not repression.
The ceremonies themselves were so precise, steeped in this formality you'd expect for such a huge transition.
Right. Mandela arrives with his daughter Zenani, and the sequence of the swearing in. It's fascinating because it's so deeply symbolic.
Who went first?
Well, the first two weren't revolutionaries at all. They were figures of transition. First, F.W. de Klerk, the previous president, the one who started dismantling apartheid.
He was sworn in as second deputy president.
Exactly. Then Thabo Mbeki, a key ANC leader, as first deputy. This deliberate inclusion of the old guard, even in a secondary role, it sent a powerful message.
But this wasn't about annihilation.
No, it was about transition. It was a commitment to reconciliation, to stability. It proved to the entire world that this new government was serious about building a whole nation.
And then, of course, the moment arrives.
Mandela takes his oath. He pledges himself to the Constitution and the well-being of the Republic.
But his address, these are the first words spoken by a black head of state from that seat of oppression. It just elevates the whole thing from a political ritual to a moral declaration.
And we have to unpack his language here. It's so formal, so prophetic. He doesn't just say, "Thanks for coming."
No, he says, "Today, all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty."
That verb, confer. Think about it. It's not passive, it's active. It means to grant, to bestow something important.
So the world leaders weren't just watching.
No, they were participating. Their presence was officially giving life, glory, and hope to this fragile new liberty.
It's the ultimate reversal. For decades, South Africa was the outlaw.
Shunned by everyone.
And now, they are the hosts. And this makes the victory universal. It becomes a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity.
And that's so critical. By defining it in those universal terms, he's linking South Africa's success to the dreams of all oppressed people everywhere.
They're no longer a pariah state.
They're the central example of a moral triumph, the validation of decades of global struggle.
He pivots immediately, though. He acknowledges what they've just achieved, political emancipation, but then he shifts to the much harder, longer battle.
Yes, political freedom was just the first step. The real pledge was to liberate all people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination.
He knew, even in that moment of pure joy, that freedom is basically meaningless if most people are still shackled by economic injustice.
Right. The chains of poverty are just as real as the chains of racist laws. He was signaling that the fight for social and economic justice was only just beginning.
And he seals this promise with language that's just.
Mm.
It's unforgettable. It's a solemn oath.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
That repetition, never, never, and never again.
It's a vow. It's a prayer forged in suffering. And the end. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. It's this almost mythical claim of permanence. He's demanding that this moment of clarity must not fade.
And as those words settle, the visual spectacle begins. All eyes go up to the sky.
A spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters, troop carriers roaring right over their heads.
A military flypast could seem a bit jarring for a newly liberated nation.
It could, but Mandela is very clear. This wasn't just a display of pinpoint precision and military force.
It was a demonstration of loyalty.
Loyalty to democracy. And this is where the symbolism just hits you with this incredible force. He describes the highest generals of the defense force and police.
Men bedecked with ribbons and medals from days gone by.
Saluting him, pledging their fidelity.
And he reflects on the chilling irony.
That only a few years before, these same men would have arrested him, or worse.
Their salute was the institutional death of the old regime, right there for the world to see. It was the state apparatus, the enforcer of apartheid, now sworn to protect the very values it had tried to destroy.
A total public institutional humbling.
And the display ends with the chevron of Impala jets tracing the new South African flag in the sky. Black, red, green, blue, and gold.
The colors of inclusion replacing the old colonial hues.
And then what might be the most powerful moment of all. The one that really captures the awkward, painful birth of reconciliation.
The two anthems.
Yes. The crowd sees white singing Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika.
God bless Africa.
And black singing Die Stem, the old anthem.
The call of South Africa.
But the reality underneath that image is so complex. Mandela points out that neither group know the lyrics of the anthem they once despised.
And that detail is just profoundly honest. They were singing the tune of unity, but the words, the meaning were still alien.
Because those two anthems carried so much historical baggage. Die Stem represented the fierce nationalism, the racial exclusivity of the Afrikaner state. It was the sound of oppression.
And Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika was the anthem of the resistance, sung in secret at great personal risk.
So on that day, the very act of trying to sing the other song was this incredible act of commitment.
It showed that reconciliation isn't some instant emotional event. It's a difficult, conscious process. They were making a pledge to a future where they would know the words by heart.
The physical acts came first.
Yes, the sound of their combined voices came before the genuine, deep-seated emotional unity could. It set the course for national healing.
And as that spectacle ends, Mandela says he was overwhelmed with a sense of history.
He felt the weight of the centuries. He understood he was standing on the shoulders of giants.
He reflects on the whole timeline. This system of racial domination was built after the Anglo-Boer War. Well, before my own birth.
And to stand there in his 80s and see that entire, seemingly permanent structure overturned forever, I mean, it's grasping the possibility of radical historical change within a single human lifetime.
And he knows that change was bought at the highest possible price.
He recalls the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people, men and women whose suffering could never, ever be repaid.
This leads to this moment of incredible humility. He says he felt he was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me.
He wasn't some lone hero. He was the point where that long and noble line ended and now began again. It's the leader completely rejecting the cult of personality.
He's just a vessel.
A vessel for the collective will and the sacrifice of his people.
And the sorrow is just... It's so thick and palpable. He talks about his pain that he couldn't thank them.
That the real pioneers of the struggle weren't alive to see what their sacrifices had wrought.
It's that painful truth, isn't it? The architects of freedom often don't get to live in the house they built.
And that sorrow leads him directly to the great paradox of apartheid.
The system designed to crush humanity.
While the system inflicted this deep and lasting wound on the country, it also had this unintentional and vital side effect.
That the decades of brutality, he argues, actually produced the very leaders who were needed to dismantle it.
It's an astounding claim that the crushing pressure forged the finest steel.
The system that was meant to dehumanize and infantilize the African population.
Instead created men like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chief Luther Lee. Individuals of such extraordinary courage, wisdom, and generosity that their like may never be known again.
Let's just pause on that for a second. That thesis. Perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character.
It's almost tragically poetic. It suggests that without that immense suffocating pressure, these people might have just lived ordinary, comfortable lives.
It shifts the entire focus away from victimhood and onto resilience.
Exactly. The system pushed people to their absolute limit, forcing them to choose between just surviving and maintaining their moral integrity.
And so often they chose integrity at immense personal cost.
To hold on to hope and generosity, the very things the system tried to extinguish, required a level of internal strength that is almost unimaginable.
And that, he concludes, is South Africa's real wealth.
Not the gold, not the diamonds.
But it's people who are finer and truer than the purest diamonds. The moral wealth forged in the fire of resistance is more valuable than any physical asset.
And this realization comes directly from his time in prison. It's where he learned his most profound lesson about bravery.
He saw men and women facing attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination.
It was watching them, seeing the terror in their eyes mixed with the absolute refusal to yield that taught him his revolutionary definition of courage.
Here it is, the seminal quote.
Courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it.
It is probably the single most important philosophical takeaway from his entire life.
Because if you think about it, if someone never feels fear, are they brave? Mandela would say no, that's just apathy, or maybe arrogance.
True bravery requires you to acknowledge the terror, to feel it deep in your stomach, and then choose to act despite it.
He says the brave man is not the one who doesn't feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. It elevates the internal struggle above the external action.
And conquering that fear connects directly to his ideas on love and hate.
He says, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion.
This is fundamental. It's the core justification for reconciliation.
Because if hate is a learned behavior, something taught and enforced by society,
Then it can be unlearned.
and love, he argues, comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite.
But how do you hold on to that belief after 27 years in prison, locked away by the very people you're supposed to find a way to love?
He answers that with a very powerful, very personal anecdote from the grimmest times in prison.
He describes moments when he and his comrades were pushed to our limits.
And yet, even then, in that dehumanizing place, he would sometimes see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards, perhaps just for a second.
A flash, a brief sign of essential human feeling.
Maybe just a flicker of eye contact, a small, unexpected kindness.
And that was enough.
It was enough to sustain him. It was proof that the system hadn't fully succeeded in its most sinister goal, which was to eradicate the soul.
That tiny glimpse proved his thesis.
Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. The guard, though he was an agent of the state, still had that essential spark. And if the oppressor still had that spark, then there was hope for their liberation too.
From there, Mandela shifts to what he calls the twin obligations that every person has.
First, your obligation to your family, parents, wife, children. And second, your obligation to your people, your community, your country.
And he says that in a civil and humane society, you should be able to balance both of those things pretty easily.
But the reality of apartheid was the deliberate, brutal sundering of those two things. For a man of color seeking justice, it became almost impossible to fulfill both.
To become an activist meant you had to reject your domestic life.
You were ripped from his family and his home, forced into what he calls a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion.
That phrase is so evocative. A twilight existence.
Neither day nor night, neither fully public nor fully private. It's an existence that's totally incompatible with just having a normal family life.
And he details his own personal sacrifice through that lens. He didn't set out wanting to give up his family.
No, he was driven to it, because when he tried to serve his people, he was blocked from being a son, a brother, a father, a husband.
And that forced choice transformed him from a family-loving husband into a man without a home.
This internal tragedy, it's the key to understanding the revolutionary mindset. But his transformation wasn't instant. It was an evolution.
An evolution of hunger.
He charts how his understanding of freedom changed over his life. As a boy, he says he was born free, free in every way that I could know.
Simple freedoms. Running in the fields, swimming in the stream, roasting corn under the stars.
But crucially, that freedom only existed as long as he obeyed the customs of my tribe. It was, at its heart, an illusion of freedom.
Then as a student, he wanted what he calls transitory freedoms.
Small, temporary rebellions, staying out late, reading what he wanted to read, superficial things, really.
Then he gets to Johannesburg, and he realizes the blockage is structural, and his wants deepen into basic and honorable freedom.
Earning a living, achieving his potential, marrying and having a family. The freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life.
The cornerstones of a normal adult life.
But the great irreversible change happens when he realizes these basic freedoms are being denied not just to him, but to everyone who looked like I did.
It wasn't personal, it was institutional, it was racial.
And at that moment, the individual hunger for his own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people.
And that desire, he says, animated my life. It transformed a frightened young man into a bold one.
And critically, it drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal in the eyes of the state. He traded personal comfort for collective justice.
And this collective realization that their suffering was shared led him to his most profound philosophical statement.
Freedom is indivisible.
The chains on any one person who was politically oppressed were the chains on all his people.
Right. If one part of the community is subjugated, the entire community is confined psychologically and morally.
And this is the bridge to his most radical idea, the one that makes real reconciliation possible.
I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed.
Which is such a challenging idea. Why does the man who built the prison need to be liberated?
Because, as Mandela argues, the man who takes away another person's freedom is fundamentally confined himself.
How so?
He's a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness.
So he's confined by his own lack of empathy, his own ignorance.
Exactly. The paradox is devastating. The oppressor builds a physical prison for his victims, but in doing so, he locks himself inside a mental and moral prison. He has to live an unfree life, constantly consumed by fear.
So the ultimate conclusion is an indictment of any system built on hate.
Yes. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Liberation can't be one-sided. It has to be a mutual restoration of dignity.
Freeing the oppressed from their physical chains.
And the oppressor from the mental chains of prejudice. So we've looked at the physical confinement of the oppressed and the moral confinement of the oppressor. Now, let's use this poem, A Tiger in the Zoo, to make that whole concept feel, well, completely visceral.
The poem just drops us right in front of this magnificent creature that's been stripped of its context. The tiger, with his vivid stripes, stalks with this innate power.
But his movement is totally neutralized. It's reduced to only the few steps of his cage.
And that contrast between his internal splendor and his external restriction, that's the core link to Mandela's experience.
The tiger is magnificent, but his power is meaningless when his territory is just a few square feet. It's a mirror of the oppressed person whose potential, their own vivid stripes, their moral wealth, is suppressed by the narrow confines of racist laws.
The poem says he's moving on paths of velvet quiet. His silence is masking this powerful, volatile interior. And then comes the crucial phrase.
In his quiet rage.
Quiet rage, that says so much.
It's the essential psychological state of anyone under prolonged oppression. It's that suppressed fury that can't erupt without lethal consequences.
It's the resilience and controlled anger of the activists in their twilight existence who have to endure suffering without breaking.
They are quietly raging against the injustice, and they preserve their dignity by refusing to be defined by the bars around them.
The tiger ignores the tourists. He only hears the sounds of his confinement, the patrolling cars at night.
Yet when he looks up, his gaze is fixed on something infinite. He stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars.
That repetition of brilliant has to be intentional.
It's so powerful. His eyes, even though they're confined, they retain their wild, original brilliance. That's the flame of humanity that can't be extinguished.
And what do they look toward?
The brilliant stars. The ultimate symbol of unbounded possibility, of infinite freedom, completely untouched by the cage.
So the tiger, like the political prisoner, sustains his hope by gazing from the finite cell toward the infinite promise.
And then the poem shifts. It shows us what the tiger should be doing.
What his true nature demands. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass, waiting by a waterhole for plump deer.
This is his uncurtailed potential, his original dignity. He should be the terrifying king of his domain, snarling around houses, terrorizing the village.
This is the full, uninhibited expression of his being. And it mirrors Mandela's evolution of freedom, those honorable freedoms he wanted.
To achieve his potential, to live an unobstructed life. That's exactly what the tiger is denied. The real tragedy is not being able to fulfill your natural design.
But the poem snaps back to reality. But he's locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars.
All that wild strength totally neutralized, reduced to just stalking the length of his cage over and over.
So when you put these two texts together, the connection is just so clear.
Mandela's comrades are forced into a twilight existence of rebellion.
And the tiger lives a twilight existence between his powerful natural habitat and the cold, hard reality of the cage.
Both texts are arguing that real dignity isn't just about survival. It's about the uninhibited expression of your full, innate potential.
The oppressed man is made into a criminal for seeking his birthright. The tiger is made into a spectacle for seeking its natural prey.
And the tiger's quiet rage gives us the emotional underpinning for Mandela's own political transformation. It explains that inner furnace, that unextinguishable flame that drove a frightened young lawyer to become the world's most famous political prisoner.
The bars might restrain the body.
But they can't restrain the burning conviction of the soul. The poem makes you feel the visceral loss that happens when any magnificent spirit, human or animal, is constrained by prejudice.
So this deep dive has really taken us through three crucial, interwoven dimensions of freedom. We started with political liberation, that glorious, symbolic achievement on May 10th, 1994.
The official dismantling of apartheid structures.
Then we moved inward to liberation from learned hate. Mandela's vital insight that hate is taught and that love can, therefore, be taught more naturally.
Supported by that unextinguishable flame of humanity he saw even in his guards, that internal moral freedom you need for any lasting peace.
And finally, we looked at the liberation from fear and the indivisibility of freedom.
The idea that courage is triumphing over fear, and that the oppressor is also a prisoner, locked behind the bars of his own prejudice.
The lessons from that day are so much more than just historical notes about South Africa.
They're personal instructions. Mandela stated that the depths of oppression, ironically, created the heights of character in those leaders.
Forging them into something finer and truer than the purest diamonds?
So if that's true, if that intense historical pressure can forge such moral steel, what kind of character, then, can be forged by the necessity of conquering the small daily fears and prejudices that still exist, even in a technically free society?
The struggle to make sure the sun never sets on that glorious human achievement of self-respect. It isn't just for governments or armies.
It's the quiet, daily, internal battle to conquer our own fear, to dismantle our own prejudices. That's the true challenge of liberation Mandela left for every single one of us. How do you transform your own quiet rage into brilliant, unstoppable, and ultimately loving action every single day? That is the work that must continue.